December 11, 1976. Scotland, Hogsmeade. Sergei exhaled with pleasure, watching the puffs of vapor from his breath hang in the frigid air. Of course, winter in Britain was a parody of the season, but in Scotland, there was even some snow, not deep enough to reach the waist, but enough to lightly dust the streets, and the houses in Hogsmeade were snugly wrapped in white snowy blankets. In a week, the Christmas holidays would begin. To his surprise, Wizards celebrated the Catholic Christmas, which fell on the night of December 24th to the 25th. The New Year, close to his heart, was also celebrated, but without much grandeur. On the morning of December 18th, the Hogwarts Express would take everyone who desired back home, returning them to the school only on the evening of January 2nd. And on the 18th, it would mark exactly 6 months since Sergei found himself in a foreign past seasoned with magic and wizardry. The thought of such a span of time didn't stir much excitement. The X-Hour was still nearly 20 years away, as were several years before the birth of Sirius's godson, and now it was almost time for a relatively carefree youth. The magic that had seemed extraordinary just 6 months ago had become the routine of everyday life. People get used to everything, and they get used to the good from the very start. On November 3rd, Sergei celebrated his 17th birthday. Among wizards, this age was considered adulthood. His parents had given him a special family artifact in the form of 2 rings. A kind of freedom and limitation. Thanks to the rings, he could choose his future bride himself, so to speak, according to his taste. However, the ring wouldn't fit just any girl. The artifact, by magical means, traced the necessary purity of blood for the family. But still, in a way, Sergei could propose even to a penniless girl, and if she agreed and willingly put on the second ring, the magic of the rings could break even an old vow or someone else's engagement, binding the ringed ones to each other. Just like that. Blacks always take what they like, regardless of conventions. And Sergei still marveled at why, according to local traditions for aristocrats, he hadn't been betrothed from childhood, like James Potter, for example. When Sergei received the magical rings along with a note from his mother, a memory surged that in the future, Sirius had given the family artifact to his friend, Potter, who also had a small trace of black blood. Such details came to mind that he and James were related through Elladora Black, who was a great-great-aunt to Lady Walburga and married Henry Potter, James's grandfather. Then, the Potters were intertwined with the Blacks again. The elder son of Henry, Carlos, married Doria Black, who was the younger sister of Sirius's grandfather. The younger son of Henry Potter, Fleamorn, married Euphemia Smith. Fleamorn and Euphemia became parents to James. However, by the time the youngest Potter was born, the children of Carlos and Doria had already grown up and flown the nest. That's how James ended up under the care of 2 mothers and fathers. Aunt Doria, as Sirius recalled, always welcomed them with James, and he used to call her Mummy. In appearance, he resembled the always active and cheerful Doria more than the phlegmatic, pale, and red-haired Euphemia. For almost a month now, Sergei had been pondering what to do with this knowledge. It seemed to be for the benefit of his future godson, but it was uncertain whether James had actually used these rings. Sirius had given them shortly before he was imprisoned. There must have been some anniversary or occasion, but Sergei couldn't recall exactly. Moreover, it was unknown whether Lily Evans had passed the test of blood purity with the ring. Maybe she hadn't. And such artifacts could come in handy for him as well. Sergei understood that most likely, among the life mistakes of Sirius, was the fact that he left no one behind. The man was almost 40, and no children, no wife, all of his youth spent in confinement. And if Sergei chose the path of the Black family, it imposed certain obligations on him. He was, after all, the heir. What was comforting was that no one was forcing him to get married right now. He had about 8 years ahead of him to decide and meet a girl, even slightly resembling Natasha. The maximum marrying age for local aristocratic men was 24 years, of course, some married later, but that was already considered bad form, and the groom was suspected of curses, unsavory inclinations, or incompetence. Sergei doubted that he could love as strongly as he did in his previous life. He sincerely considered himself monogamous. However, in theory, in the magical society, no one demanded extraterrestrial passions and love from him. A spouse should maintain the household, raise children, respect her husband, and organize social events. Sirius had a certain success with female students, and many girls would agree to marry a wealthy heir of a renowned family without deep love. In a word, capitalists. Lost in thought, Sergei, along with Remus and Peter, reached Hogsmeade. James accompanied Evans and trailed slightly behind them. However, it was possible that he did so deliberately to spend some time alone with the girl. During the last week before the holidays, almost all seventh-year students rushed to the village to browse and buy gifts for the upcoming Christmas. Sergei sincerely hoped that he would still have a whole week to go shopping in London. He couldn't even imagine what to get for his parents and was anxious about it. Therefore, it was necessary to see what people were choosing and what was available in the magical assortment. He didn't know the tastes of James, Peter, and Remus, but thankfully he had money, and with money, any fool could buy a good gift. The friends didn't bother him much and were occasionally useful, having proven themselves as decent guys, especially when they left their pranks aside. It turned out that the main instigators of the Marauders' fun were Sirius himself and James, who was now extremely busy courting Lily Evans and was doing his best to appear good and on the path of improvement in front of the girl. In the past, Sirius had given his friends some nonsense, knives, mischievous items, and he even once gave a muggle pistol with silver bullets to Lupin. To Peter, he gave a magical mousetrap, though it was unclear why and for what. Various sweets of questionable taste and value, like bloody lollipops or enchanted cupcakes that grew teeth, noses, and ears, were also common gifts. Such gifts mostly ended up with Pettigrew, and Sirius, pleased with teasing his friend, laughed and rejoiced when he caught him in another prank. However, Sergei suspected that Peter was being caught on purpose to remain one of them in their company and please Sirius. The most interesting part was that Sirius's friends gave him things that were likely beyond their means: expensive quills, good sweets, soft gloves, or the latest novelties from Zonko's joke shop. Sergei believed that nonsense was always nonsense, whether in the magical world or in the muggle one, and stupid pranks remained stupid, regardless of magic and charms. Remus, for example, had a winter cloak that was a bit small for him, barely reaching his knees, and Peter was constantly sniffling because he was always cold in the icy castle during winter. James, of course, he didn't need anything in particular, but Sergei contemplated special goggles like those worn by mountaineers or athletes, so that during Quidditch matches, Potter wouldn't have to charm his glasses to stay on his head. Well, he could also give a gift like movie or theater tickets, so he could invite his girlfriend, asking Evans to be a guide in the muggle world. Peter wandered off to one of the shops, and Sergei headed towards Malpepper's apothecary. In the Hogsmeade branch of the apothecary, the nephew of the owner, Asclepius Malpepper, worked.
"Why are you here?"
Remus Lupin, who was walking alongside Sergei, asked in surprise and added with a smirk.
"Are you planning to give a gift to Snape too?"
Sergei had established a kind of friendly business relationship with Severus Snape. Snape didn't refuse their joint potion-making sessions, but he demanded certain ingredients as payment, providing a list of them. Usually, the cost of the list was around 4 or 5 galleons. About a month ago, Snape even shared with Sergei why he needed these ingredients and what he was brewing. "It's something I'm dealing with, Snape," Sergei replied evenly. He claims to have come up with a Wolfbane potion. Preliminary experiments are underway. So, I'm buying ingredients for him.
"Wolfbane?"
Remus asked, glancing around slightly. "Exactly," Sergei nodded. "It's a potion that helps a werewolf retain their human consciousness during full moons."
"So, is that why you declined our walks together? You're conducting experiments? This. Is it really for me? Serious? This. I don't know what to say."
"Admit it, the hairy problem doesn't concern just you, but overall, it's because of you," Sergei nodded. He had no idea why Severus suddenly became interested in anti-werewolf potions, but he suspected that the attack of a werewolf played a significant role. So, he wasn't entirely lying.
"When?" When will the potion be ready?
I'm thinking of inviting Snape to join us for Christmas, Sergei replied, although the idea came to him spontaneously. My father is quite knowledgeable about potions. He could take a look and ensure that it's safe for consumption by anyone. Yes, I'll probably do that. So after the holidays, I hope you'll be able to try it. If my father gives his approval, Snape, of course, knows a lot about it, but the check is necessary. His memory reminded him that in the future, Severus Snape would become one of the youngest masters of potions in British history. But Sergei wasn't cynical enough to give his untested potions to a friend without having an older person verify it.
Then I won't bother you.
Remus blushed.
Thank you, Sirius.
Well, there's not much to thank me for yet. Sergei was surprised by such a vivid reaction.
Nevertheless. For trying. You, of course, support me and all that, but, remaining human it's a happiness like no other. Maybe you just can't understand that.
Sergei nodded and entered the apothecary. The Malpepers always smelled of a strange mixture of spices, herbs, and rotten apples. Tomorrow, they would have their last session with Snape, and on Tuesday, Slughorn would organize Christmas potion cutting in the potions class. For all the recent potions, the Slytherin head of house had given Sergei an excellent. Maybe he could give Snape something. As a token of gratitude for the lessons. Of course, nothing too personal would be suitable here, no robes or clothing. Snape was already doing a great favor by training them in animagus transformations and sometimes flying together. Still, two ravens were almost like a flock. They could show off in front of each other, and once they even had to endure a small aerial battle with some ravens that didn't like their presence near a tree on the edge of the Forbidden Forest. Everything as per the list, Sergei requested, handing Asclepius Malpeper a piece of paper filled with Snape's neat, bead-like handwriting. Can you tell me if you have any special vials for potions? Unbreakable or non-losing?
You want to give a gift to a friend who's interested in potion making?
Yes, something like that, Sergei nodded. A rather somber Snape emerged from the Three Broomsticks and crossed paths with Sergei on his way out of the apothecary. Hey, he greeted. Why the long face? Severus chuckled at the subtle tease and relaxed slightly. I bought all the ingredients, I can give them to you right now. He then remembered the vials that were packed together. Well, no, I can't, they slipped something else in there. I'll sort everything out and give it to you. Tomorrow morning. You're not going to experiment with anything today anyway, right?
I don't know. As you wish. Did you really buy a gift for your brother in the apothecary? There's not much at Malpeper's. Unless you decided to delight Regulus with valerian tincture?
Snape squinted his black eyes. Sergei vaguely realized that the fame of Sirius's peculiar gifts had spread far beyond the Gryffindor common room, but he didn't understand how his brother was connected to this. What does Regulus have to do with it? He asked foolishly.
It's his birthday tomorrow, December 12th. Or did you forget about that too?
Sergei stared at Severus and tried to access Sirius's memory. Nothing. This idiot didn't remember his own brother's birthday. Luckily, he ran into Snape, who knew about it. I confess, I forgot, Sergei mumbled. Listen, Severus, be a friend, help me choose a gift for him. Maybe a book? Or a toy? I mean, some kind of magical trinket? Although he's 15. What should I give? Damn. Completely slipped my mind.
Fine, I'll help you. But it's only for Regulus.
Of course, Sergei nodded cheerfully. Where are we going first? Oh. I have to ask you. What are your plans for the Christmas holidays?
Same as usual. I'll stay at Hogwarts. Perhaps Slughorn will allow me to work in the laboratory a bit.
I'm not insisting, Sergei said cautiously. But I was thinking about your potion. The Wolfbane one. We have a large laboratory at home, and my father is really into potions. It seems he even has some publications, but I'm not sure. You see, you could stay with us. Show your potion to my father, maybe he'll give you some useful advice, and he has a lot of ingredients. Regulus would be thrilled, and I'm totally fine with it. And we also have a big library. And many rooms.
Are you inviting me to your house for Christmas?
Severus asked, skeptically squinting. If you don't want to, then you don't have to, but I corresponded with my father and mentioned what we're doing and about that potion. He's intrigued, interested, Sergei answered, as always, wondering why he often felt like a sapper in a minefield when dealing with Snape.
I need to think about it.
Okay, think about it, Sergei agreed. So where are we going to start looking for a gift?
To the bookstore.
The best gift is a book, Sergei quoted a well-known saying.
Of course.
Severus replied, not getting the joke.
The 22nd of December 1976. England, London, Black House. Walburga Black scrutinized herself in the mirror with a critical eye. Almost 18 years had passed, and each year had left its mark on her face. Everything came with a price. Her magical peers looked like they were 25 in Muggle years, while at 51, she appeared to be in her 40s. Soon, the aging process would accelerate even more, and by 60, she'd probably look like a 60-year-old Muggle. Life expectancy would likely diminish too. She doubted she'd make it to 100 years. Though, by that point, she'd likely transform into a hideous, wrinkled witch. Walburga carefully applied a new beauty potion around her eyes to hide the onset of crow's feet. Her favorite high-neck dress should conceal the sagging of her neck, delicate gloves would cover her hands, and subtle distraction charms would prevent anyone from staring too intently at her face, noticing encroaching age. In comparison to Orion, who was, after all, 3 years her junior, Walburga already looked 5 years older. And the gap would only widen, despite Orion's lavish sideburns that made him resemble his father. Walburga admitted that the relationship between her and Orion had cooled in recent years. He used to be madly in love with her. On his 17th birthday, using his grandfather's artifact rings, Sirius Black II, the last of the Blacks with advanced artifactory magic, Orion dared to break off her engagement with Ignatius Pruitt, who would later marry Orion's older sister, Lucretia. Everything came with a price. Walburga was happy with her husband until the winter of 58. Then, Orion devised the ritual for her himself, despite his reservations, though he advised against it. But she wanted it this way, to give their boys one more chance. For a time, they were happy again, and it seemed like everything was on track. Then Sirius went to Hogwarts, grew up, and became entirely uncontrollable. Coupled with his regressions and rapid aging, this drove Walburga to the brink of madness. The scandals with their son drove a wedge between her and her husband, who didn't want to see her in such a state, and who also reproached her for paying too little attention to Regulus. Walburga looked at herself in the mirror again, adjusted her chin, and smiled at her reflection. If half a year ago, as she stood before the old mirror, she allowed herself some regret, now those regrets and self-pity were gone. After all, her eldest son didn't disappoint her hopes, her expectations, and was worth all those years of life. And in recent months, Orion. Perhaps not all feelings and passions had been spent. Sirius had turned things around and was applying himself. Walburga looked warmly at the stack of letters in her jewelry box. After the summer holidays, Sirius had been writing to both her and Orion every few days. There were brief notes about everything being fine, and long letters several feet in length detailing the week's news, musings, and questions about her opinion. Her eldest son wrote about his potion experiments with Regulus's Slytherin friend. About learning animagi skills with Regulus. About his plans for a magical motorbike. Walburga was magnanimously willing to forgive Sirius's fascination with Muggle toys, thinking, let the child find comfort in whatever he may. But then, when Sirius sent her preliminary sketches and diagrams, she was enthralled. It wasn't just a toy. One of the family's talents had awakened in Sirius, a passion for artifacts. What did it matter if a child liked to delve into something that fascinated him more? Men, in general, loved broomsticks, Quidditch, speed, sports, and excitement. Sirius loved Muggle transportation. But you couldn't bury such a talent in the ground just because of that. Therefore, Wahlberger showed keen interest in her son's hobby, not wanting to miss out on this development and nurturing success in their changing relationship. She perused interesting manuscripts in the mansion's library to gently nudge and guide Sirius, making notes from folios and doing her best to support her elder child. She even overcame herself a few times to venture into Muggle London, to see these motorbikes for herself. Through one of the estate managers, she purchased the finest brand, a Harley-Davidson, as a Christmas gift for her son. If the child wanted a toy, why not? Especially if it was properly equipped, this toy would be safer than a broomstick. She also liked the idea of a helmet. Such protection wouldn't hurt even some Quidditch players. She was pleased that neither her eldest nor youngest children were interested in that magical sport. Over time, the tone of Sirius's letters became more heartfelt and less formal. Her son shared his thoughts and feelings with her, and it was so unusual, new, and exciting. One of his recent letters, written in mid-December, was particularly lengthy. Sirius unexpectedly confessed that he had been treating a certain boy from Slytherin terribly. He had mocked the poor half-blood with his friends. This boy, Severus Snape, had befriended Regulus due to a shared interest in books and learning. Additionally, he didn't get along with his peers and was very intelligent, though introverted and unsociable. Sirius also admitted that he had participated in a prank at the End of Owls that was set up by someone, presumably James, who levitated Severus, causing him not only to reveal his worn-out underpants to the whole school but also to quarrel with the only girl from Gryffindor he was friends with. In the letter, Sirius deeply regretted his behavior, acknowledging that he was trying to put an end to the feud. A very mature and wise decision. And all these Madrid passions reminded Wahlberger of her own time at school. Although, back then, corporal punishment was still practiced, and Director Dick Pett was quite strict, unlike Dumbledore, who had grown lax in politics. Sirius humorously described his adventure with a familiar when he, in the guise of a raven, ended up in Severus Snape's cage. The boy had been kind to the bird, and Sirius felt even more ashamed of his past behavior. Her boy had been trying to make amends, and they started working on potions together with Severus. Sirius was amazed by this Slytherin's skills and talents. He even wrote to his father about how it was this boy who was developing and inventing things. Wahlberger herself had a fondness for potions and recognized that deciding to create a werewolf potion was quite bold and ambitious. Sirius wrote that he had invited Severus Snape to spend Christmas holidays with them. He asked her to refrain from pressuring the boy, who was very proud yet practically penniless. On the morning of the 18th, an owl brought a note saying that Severus Snape had agreed to visit them, and they would arrive, as usual, around 10 in the evening at King's Cross Station. Almost for the first time in recent years, Wahlberger greeted Sirius with joyful anticipation, a sense of celebration, rather than just another scandal. She was even willing to endure a Muggle-born Gryffindor at the family table, let alone a fairly intelligent but poor half-blood Slytherin.
Mom. I missed you so much, hello.
The eldest son exclaimed, appearing at the doorstep with the help of an elf. This was followed by hugs, a kiss on the cheek, and Sirius nudging Regulus toward her.
Mom!
The younger child followed the older one's example, hugging her even tighter.
Mom, this is Severus, our friend.
Sirius introduced her to the serious, gloomy-looking boy. Severus Snape had black hair and black eyes, a slightly prominent nose, and for now, his figure was somewhat awkward. "You must be hungry, I presume." Wahlberger smiled, trying to charm her children's guest and tactfully avoid examining the slightly worn elbows on his too short robe. "Dinner will be ready in about 40 minutes. The house elves have prepared rooms for you and some spare clothes. You can freshen up and change in the meantime. Severus, would it be all right if you wear Sirius's clothes? He has a closet full of hardly worn items, and I've arranged for some to be placed in your room. Hopefully, it will be enough for the 2 weeks. Can you adjust them to your size yourself? Although you and Sirius are nearly the same height and build, it might not be necessary." Severus blushed slightly and seemed taken aback by her insistence, but he nodded. "Regulus, escort our guest. His room is next to yours."
Let's go, I'll show you.
The younger son nodded, pulling Severus upstairs. Sirius grinned widely and winked at her, signaling that he had figured out her plan. During the next few days, Wahlberger managed to glean the history of Severus Snape's family from him. It turned out that his mother's maiden name was Prince. Wahlberger couldn't recall Snape's mother from her time at Hogwarts, nor could she have remembered her given the age difference, but in the late 1950s, when Wahlberger had practically stopped keeping track of society's affairs, there was some scandal involving the princes. According to rumors, Severus Snape's daughter, Eileen Prince, was not particularly attractive and also gloomy and withdrawn. Either her fiancé abandoned her or nobody wanted to associate with her because of her gloomy nature. Eileen didn't get married until she was 24 and then disappeared somewhere, with no one knowing where she went. And here's how it happened. Apparently, in desperation, Eileen decided to sever ties with the magical world and married the first muggle she found, Tobias Snape. A clear melancholic with a self-destructive streak, something Wahlberger did not approve of. Interestingly, Severus wasn't even aware that he was named after his grandfather. The boy knew next to nothing about his relatives. On one hand, the child wasn't responsible for his mother's antics, but on the other hand, to taint pure blood like that. Nonetheless, even despite his half-blood status, Severus managed to get into Slytherin, which spoke volumes. The boy was somewhat wild and guarded, suggesting a troubled family background, but he excelled in intelligence, knowledge, and a thirst for learning. He also got along with Orion, disappearing with him into the laboratory for half the day, only emerging for lunch. The Blacks didn't typically accept half-bloods into their family, especially ones who were not just Muggle-born, but from Muggle parents. The family code, written long ago, demanded it, and its violators were severely punished. For everything, there was a price to pay, especially for magical power and gifts. How much Wahlberger talked with Andromeda, who suddenly had the urge to marry a Muggle-born. Orion and Sirius even found a way to incorporate Tonks into the family, but at the last moment, Andromeda got scared. The family magic could have killed her fiancé. The silly young girl wasn't afraid for her father, who had poured so much magical power and blood onto the family altar for her happiness. Thinking about her younger brother, Wahlberger smiled quietly. Apparently, all Blacks were like that when it came to their children. They shared this trait with Sirius. But still, a botched ritual, followed by the forced disassociation of the eldest daughter from the family. Would Sirius live to 70 at least? However, Wahlberger also knew that only a few magical families in Britain strictly adhered to such codes. The princes might not have been among them. "Severus, may we talk?" Wahlberger knocked on the guest's room, finally finding the courage. After all, she had nothing to lose. Severus opened the door. Regulus was also in the room with him. They were probably reading and discussing something. "Regulus, could you leave us for a moment, please?" "I won't be long," Wahlberger requested, addressing her younger son.
Of course, Mother. I was just about to call Sirius over. I'll fetch him.
May I come in? Once Regulus had left, Walburga inquired.
Of course, Lady Walburga,
Severus replied, blushing slightly.
and besides, this is your house.
This is your room too, she responded. May I take a seat?
Yes, of course.
He cleared a chair of books and took his seat only after she had settled, showing his understanding of etiquette. The thing is, our family has a connection with your grandfather, Severus Prince. I wanted to ask you if it would be all right for me to write to him and invite him for dinner. Would you like to meet him?
Is it whether he wants to meet me?
Severus responded immediately. I can delicately write about you being our guest and judge his reaction to the letter. Based on that and whether he accepts the invitation, we can draw appropriate conclusions, Walburga explained. But if you're not interested in getting to know him, I won't bother Mr. Prince. Besides, he might not even know of your existence. As far as I know, only the Blacks, the Burkes, the Malfoys, the Pruitts, and a few other families have such convenient artifacts as ancestral tapestries. Severus's eyes, now ignited with intense emotions, showed a mix of doubt and hope. He was still learning to control his expressions in such complex situations, and Walburga could see both the hesitation and the desire. Nevertheless, Severus came to a decision fairly quickly and managed to compose his facial expression.
I would be honored if you could write a letter to my Severus Prince, Lady Walburga. I would welcome the opportunity to learn what my relative thinks of me.
Very well, I'll send an hour after lunch, Walburga nodded, contemplating how to compose the letter to Prince. She did want her children to have worthy friends in every sense.